Au pays de cocaine. I can't remember any details of our first week in Paris. Details had ceased to exist. We whirled from pleasure to pleasure in one inexhaustible rush. We took everything in our stride. I cannot begin to describe the blind, boundless beatitude of love. Every incident was equally exquisite. Of course, Paris lays herself out especially to deal with people in just that state of mind. We were living at 10 times the normal voltage. This was true in more senses than one. I had taken £1,000 in cash from London, thinking, as I did, so how jolly it was to be reckless. We were going to have a good time, and damn the expense, and realize how cheap these sorts of drugs were compared to modern prices. I thought of £1,000 as enough to paint Paris every color of the spectrum for quite an indefinitely long period. But at the end of the week, the £1,000 were gone, and so was another £1,000 for which I had cabled to London, and we had absolutely nothing to show for it except a couple dresses for Lou and a few not very expensive pieces of jewelry. We felt that we were very economical. We were too happy to need to spend money. For one thing, love never needs more than pittance, and I never had before known what love could mean. What I may call the honeymoon part of the honeymoon seemed to occupy the whole of our waking hours. It left us no time to haunt Montmartre. We hardly troubled to eat. We hardly knew what we were eating. We didn't seem to need sleep. We never got tired. The first hint of fatigue sent one's hand to one's pocket. One sniff, which gave us a sensation of the most exquisitely delicious wickedness, and we were on fourth speed again. I think of pictures of people that are shamans and stuff. It's like that's what they look at the inside, but from the outside, it's like, oh, I don't want to be in that state, even if I'm convinced I'm in another state, right? The only incident worth recording is the receipt of a letter and a box from Greta Webster. The box contained a padded kimono for Lou, one of those gorgeous Japanese geisha silks, blue like a summer sky, with dragons worked all over it in gold, with scarlet eyes and tongues. Lou looked more distractingly, deliriously glorious than ever. I had never been particularly keen on women. The few love affairs which had come my way had been rather silly and sordid. They had not revealed the possibilities of love. In fact, I had thought it a somewhat overrated pleasure, a brief and brutal blindness, with boredom and disgust hard on its heels. But with cocaine, things are absolutely different. I want to emphasize the fact that cocaine is, in reality, a local anesthetic. That is the actual explanation of its action. One cannot feel one's body, as everyone knows this is the purpose for which it is used in surgery and dentistry. Now, don't imagine that this means that the physical pleasures of marriage are diminished, but they are utterly etherealized. The animal part of one is intensely stimulated so far as its own action is concerned, but the feeling that this passion is animal is completely transmuted. I come of a very refined race, keenly observant and easily nauseated. The little intimate incidents inseparable from love affairs, which, in normal circumstances, tend to jar the delicacy of one's sensibilities, do so no longer when one's furnace is full of coke. Everything soever is transmuted as by heavenly alchemy into a spiritual beatitude. One is intensely conscious of the body, but as the Buddhists tell us, The body is, in reality, an instrument of pain or discomfort. We have, all of us, a subconscious intuition that this is the case, and this is annihilated by cocaine. Oh, when you got $1 million of cocaine, what are you, Steven Tyler or something? Let me emphasize once more the absence of any reaction. Well, I mean, not in today, not in today's money, not back then. There is where the infernal subtlety of the drug comes in. If one's on the bust in the ordinary way of alcohol, one gets what the Americans call the morning after the night before. Nature warns us that we have been breaking the rules, and nature has given us common sense enough to know that although we can borrow a bit, we have to pay back. We have drunk alcohol since the beginning of time, and it is in our racial consciousness that although a hair of the dog will put one right after a spree, it won't do to choke oneself with hair. But with cocaine, all this caution's utterly abrogated. Nobody would really be much the worse for a night with the drug, provided that he had the sense to spend the next day in a Turkish bath and build up with food and a double allowance of sleep. But cocaine insists upon one's living upon one's capital and assures one that the fun is inexhaustible. You can have the face numb, pleasurably numb feeling without drugs. As I've shared in various experiences. As I said, it is a local and aesthetic. It deadens any feeling which might arouse what psychologists call inhibition. One becomes absolutely reckless. One is bounding with health and bubbling with high spirits. It is a blind excitement of so sublime a character that it is impossible to worry about anything, and yet this excitement is singularly calm and profound. There is nothing of the suggestion of coarseness which we associate with ordinary drunkenness. The very idea of coarseness or commonness is abolished. It is like the vision of Peter in the Acts of the Apostles, in which he is told, "There is nothing common or unclean." Well, there was a lesson behind that. As Blake said, everything that lives is holy. Every act is a sacrament. Incidents which, in the ordinary way, would check one or annoy one become merely material for joyous laughter. Well, people say the same about marijuana. It is just as when you drop a tiny lump of sugar into champagne. It bubbles afresh when this is digression, but that is just what cocaine does. The sober continuity of thought is broken up. One goes off at a tangent, a fresh, fierce, fantastic tangent, of the slightest excuse. One's sense of proportion is gone, and despite all the millions of miles that one cheerily goes out of one's way, one never loses the sight of one's goal. While I have been writing all this, I have never lost sight for a moment of the fact that I'm telling you about the box and the letter from Gretel. We met a girl in Paris, half a red Indian, a lovely baby with the fascination of a fiend, and a fund of the foulest stories that ever were told. She lived on cocaine. She was a more or less uneducated girl, and the way she put it was this: I'm in a long, lovely garden with my arms full of parcels, and I keep on dropping one, and when I stoop to pick it up, I always drop another, and all the time I am sailing along up the garden. So, this was Gretel's letter. My darling Lou, I cannot begin to tell you the other day how delighted I was to see you, my lady, and with such a splendid man for your husband. I don't blame you for getting married in such a hurry, but on the other hand, you mustn't blame your old friends for not being prophets. So I could not be on hand with the goods. However, I've lost no time. You know how poor I am, but I hope you will value the little present I am sending you. not for its own sake, but as a token of my deep affection for the loveliest and most charming girl I know. A word in your ear, my dear. Lou, the inside is sometimes better than the outside, with my very kindest regards and best wishes to dear Sir Peter and yourself, though I cannot expect you to know that I even exist at the present. Yours ever devoutly, Gretel. Lou threw the letter across the table to me. For some reason or no reason, I was irritated. I didn't want to hear from people like that at all. I didn't like or trust her. Queer fish, I said rather snappily. It wasn't my own voice. It was, I fancy, some deep instinct of self-preservation speaking within me. Lou, however, was radiant about it. I wish I could give you an idea of the sparkling quality of everything she said and did. Her eyes glittered, her lips twittered, her cheeks glowed like fresh-blown buds in spring. She was the spirit of cocaine incarnate, cocaine made flesh. Her, merely her mere existence made the universe infinitely exciting. Say if you like, she was possessed of the devil. Any good person, so called, would have been shocked and scared at her appearance. She represented the siren, the vampire, Melusine, the dangerous, delicious devil, that cowards have invented to explain their lack of manliness. Nothing would suit her mood but that we should dine up there in the room, so that she could wear the new kimono and dance for me at dinner. And one of the things is that the devil's controls over people, that's their choice. Sometimes people give a little control over here, a little control over there, and they get dragged along and they're like watching themselves do stuff, but they started that process. We ate gray caviar, spoonful by spoonful. Who cared that it is worth 3 times its weight in gold? Well, cocaine, heroin at the very least is worth more than its weight in gold, and we'll find out more about Aleister Crowley and Rose Kelly's experience with that later. It's no use calling me extravagant. If you want to blame anyone, blame the Kaiser. He started the whole fuss, and when I feel like eating gray caviar, I'm going to eat gray caviar. We wolfed it down. It's silly to think that things matter. Lou danced like a delirious demon between the courses. It pleased her to assume the psychology of the Oriental pleasure-making woman. I was her Pasha with 3 tails, her samurai warrior, her gorgeous Maharaja with the scimitar across my knee, ready to cut her head off at the first excuse. She was the Uled Na'el with tattooed cheeks and chin, with painted antimony eyebrows and red smeared lips. I was the masked Tureg, the brigand from the desert who had captured her. She played 1,000 exquisite, crazy parts. I have very little imagination. My brain runs entirely to analysis, but I revel in playing a part that is devised for me. I don't know how many times during that one dinner I turned from a civilized husband in Bond Street pajamas into a raging madman. It was only after the waiters had left us with the coffee and liqueurs, which we drank like water without being affected, that Lou suddenly threw off her glittering garment. She stood in the middle of the room and drank a champagne glass half full of liquor brandy. The entrancing boldness of her gesture started me screaming inwardly. I jumped up like a crouching tiger that suddenly sees a stag. Lou was giggling all over with irrepressible excitement. I know giggling all over. Isn't English, but I can't express it any other way. And what's that line from the 3 Days song by Jane's Addiction? Feeling like we are, like we were, but never will again. And, that's what people are going to chase. But we're still in paradise here, so. She checked my rush as if she had been playing full back in an international rugger match. Get the scissors, she whispered. I understood in a second what she meant. It was perfectly true. We had been playing it a bit on the heavy side with that snow. I think it must have been about 5 sniffs. If you're curious, all you have to do is to go back and count it up to get me to 10,000 feet above the poor old straits of Dover. God bless them. But it was adding up like the price of the nails in the horse's shoes that my father used to think funny when I was a kid. You know what I mean. Martingale principle and all that sort of thing. We certainly had been punishing that snow. 5 sniffs. It wasn't much in our young lives after a fortnight. Gwendolen Otter says, Heart of my heart, in the pale moonlight, why should we wait till tomorrow night? And that's really very much the same spirit. Heart of my heart, come out of the rain. Let's have another go of cocaine. I know I don't count when it comes to poetry, and the distinguished authoress can well afford to smile, if it's only the society smile, and step quietly over my remains. But I really have got the spirit of the thing. Always go on till you have to stop. Let's have another sniff, old top. No, that's undignified. Carry on over the top would be better. It's more dignified and patriotic. It expresses the idea much better. And if you don't like it, you can inquire elsewhere. No, I won't admit that we were reckless. We had substantial resources at our command. There was nothing whatever of the long firm about us. You all know perfectly well how difficult it is to keep matches. Perfectly trivial things. Matches, always using them, always easy to replace them, no matter at all for surprise. If one should find one's box empty, and I don't admit for one moment that I showed any lack of proportion in the matter. Now don't bring that moonlight flight to Paris up against me. I admit I was out of gas, but everyone knows how one's occupation with one's first love affair is liable to cause a temporary derangement of one's ordinary habits. What I liked about it was that evidently Gretel was a jolly good sport. Whatever people said about her, and she wasn't an ordinary kind of good old sport either, I don't see any reason why I shouldn't admit that she is what you may call a true friend in the most early Victorian sense of the word you can imagine. She was not only a true friend, but a wise friend. She had evidently foreseen that we were going to run short of the good old snow. Now I want all you fellows to take it as read that a man, if he calls himself a man, isn't the kind of man that wants to stop a honeymoon with a girl in a Japanese kimono of the variety described, to have to put on a lot of beastly clothes and hunt all around Paris for a dope peddler. Of course, you'll say at once that I could have a rung for the waiter and have him bring me a few cubic kilometers, but that's simply because you don't understand the kind of hotel at which we were unfortunate enough to be staying. We had gone there thinking no harm whatever. It was right up near the Etoile, and appeared to the naked eye an absolutely respectable first-class family hotel for the sons of the nobility and gentry. Now, don't run away with the idea that I want to knock the hotel. It was simply because France had been bled white, but the waiter on our floor was a middle-aged family man and probably read Lamartine and Pascal and Taine and all those appalling old bores when he wasn't doing shot drill with the caviar. But it isn't the slightest use my trying to conceal from you the fact that he always wore a slightly shocked expression, especially in the way he cut his beard. It was emphatically not the thing whenever he came into the suit. I am a bit of a psychologist myself, and I know perfectly well that man would have got us cocaine. Not if we'd offered him a bureau de tabac for doing it. You know, nowadays, particularly since things are illegal, people have even stronger morals that one drug is wrong and another drug. It's like it's the same class of things. Like I met a guy who was a crack dealer, and you know felt persecuted because of his convictions, and it's like I told him straight up, it's like if you ran a convenience store or something, you wouldn't have been doing any you know any less wrong or something. It's the same thing, sell alcohol, cocaine. I mean, it's not the same thing, but you know what I mean. Now, of course, I'm not going to ask you to believe that Greta Webster knew anything about that waiter, beastly old prig. All she had done was to exhibit wise forethought and intelligent friendship. She had experience, no doubt, bushels of it, barrels of it, hogsheads of it. All those measures that I couldn't learn at school, she had said to herself in perfectly general terms without necessarily contemplating any particular train of events as follows. From one cause or another, those nice kids may find themselves shy on snow at a critical moment in their careers, so it's up to me to see that they get it. While these thoughts were passing through my mind, I had got the manicure scissors, and Lou was snipping the threads of her kimono lining round those places where those fiercely fascinating fingers of hers had felt what we used to call in the hospital a foreign body. Yes, there was no mistake. Gretel had got our psychology. We had got her psychology. Everything was going as well as green peas go with a duck. Don't imagine we had to spoil the kimono. It was just a tuck in the quilting. Out comes a dear little white silk bag, and we open that, and there's a heap of snow that I'd much rather see than Mont Blanc. Well, when you see it, you've got to sniff it. What's it for? Nobody can answer that. Don't tell me about use in operations on the throat. Lou didn't need anything done to her throat. She sang like Melba, and she looked like a peach, and she was a pitcha Melba, just like 2 and 2 makes 4. You bet we sniffed, and then we danced all around the suit for several hours, probably as much as 8 or 9 minutes by the clock. But what's the use of talking about clocks when Einstein has proven that time is only another dimension of space? What's the good of astronomers proving that the Earth wiggles round 1,000 miles an hour and wiggles on 1,000 miles a minute if you can't keep going? One of the interesting things, though, is that mystically, you can get the sense of time expanding or contracting. You can feel like in a moment, you can feel like days have passed, and you remember like days have passed. And the other way around. You can spend all night, and it would be absolutely silly to hang about and get left behind, and very likely find ourselves on the moon and nobody to talk to but Jules Verne, H.G. Wells, and that crowd. Now, I don't want you to think that the white silk packet was very big. Didn't H.G. Wells know where Atlantis was according to the Africans rather than the Greeks? Lou stopped over the table. Her long, thin tongue shot out of her mouth like an anteater in the dictionary of national biography or whatever it is, and twiddled it round in that snow till I nearly went out of my mind. I laughed like a hyena to think of what she said to me. Your kiss is bitter with cocaine. That chap Swinburne was always talking about bitter kisses. What did he know, poor old boy? Until you've got your mouth full of cocaine, you don't know what kissing is. One kiss goes on from phase to phase, like one of those novels by Balzac and Zola and Roman Roland and D.H. Lawrence and those chaps, and you never get tired. You're on fourth speed all the time, and the engine purrs like a kitten, a big white kitten with the stars in its whiskers, and it's always different and always the same, and it never stops, and you go insane, and you stay insane, and you probably don't know what I'm talking about, and I don't care a bit, and I'm awfully sorry for you, and you can't find out any minute you like by the simple process of getting a girl like Lou and a lot of cocaine. What did that fellow Lamas say? McGregor Mathers. Stab your demoniac smile to my brain. Soak me in cognac, kisses, and cocaine. Queer fish, that chap Lamas. But seems to me that's pretty good evidence he knew something about it. Why, of course he did. I saw him take cocaine myself. Deep chap. Bet you a shilling. Knows a lot. That's no reason for suspicion. Don't see why people run him down the way they do. Don't see why I got so leery myself. Probably a perfectly decent chap at bottom. He's got his funny little ways. Man's no worse for that. Gad, if one started to get worried about funny little ways. What price, Lou? Queerest card in the pack. And I love her. Give me another sniff off your hand. Lou laughed like a chime of bells in Moscow on Easter morning. Remember, the Russian Easter is not the same as our Easter. They slipped up a fortnight one way or the other. I never can remember which, as long as you know what I mean. Yeah, the Catholic and Orthodox Easter don't really align most years. But it isn't that they slipped up. The Orthodox kept to one tradition, and the Catholics developed it in another way. She threw the empty silk bag in the air and caught it in her teeth with a passionate snap, which sent me nearly out of my mind again. I would have loved to be a bird and have my head snapped off by those white, small, sharp incisors. Practical girl, my Lady Pendragon. Instead of going off the deep end, she was cutting out another packet, and when it was opened, instead of the birds beginning to sing, she said, in shrill excitement, "Look here, Cocky, this isn't snow." I ought to explain that she calls me Cocky in allusion to the fact that my name is Peter. I came out of my trance. I looked at the stuff with what I imagined to have been a dull, glazed eye. Then my old training came to my rescue. It was a white powder with a tendency to form little lumps, rather like chalk. I rubbed it between my finger and thumb. I smelt it. That told me nothing. I tasted it. That told me nothing either, because the nerves of my tongue were entirely anesthetized by cocaine. But the investigation was a mere formality. I know now why I made it. It was the mere gesture of the male I wanted to show off to Lou. I wished to impress upon her my importance as a man of science, and all the time I knew without being told what it was. So did she. The longer I have known Lou, the more impressed I am with the extent and variety of her knowledge. Now, if you don't know what it is, it's something that has a much worse reputation than cocaine, but it's nowhere near as bad on the brain and body, I mean, in its actuality. But I've met like I've met like good 13 times or so people tried to deal it to me, and I'm like, these people don't know what the actual drug looks like. Oh, Gretel, it's too sweet, she chirped. She guessed we might get rid of Coco, grateful and comforting as it is. So the dear old thing sent us some heroin, and there are still some people who tell us that life is not worth living. Ever try it? I asked, and delayed the answer with a kiss. When the worst was over, she told me that she had only taken it once, and then in a very minute dose. The packages used to say like a 48th of a gram, which is higher than most people try nowadays. That's all right, I said. From the height of my superior knowledge, it's all a question of estimating the physiological dose. It's a very it's very fine indeed. The stimulation is very much better than that of morphine. One gets the same intense beatific calm, but without the languor. Why, Lou darling, you've read De Quincey and all those people about opium, haven't you? Opium's a mixture, something like 20 different alkaloids in it. Laudanum, Coleridge took it, and Clive, all sorts of important people. Laudanum's more dangerous than heroin. You're basically drinking hard liquor with opium in it. It's a solution of opium and alcohol. Oh, okay, it explains it, sorry. But morphia is the most active and important of the principles in opium. Well, codeine has a different effect than morphine, having been prescribed on both sides, right? You could take it in all sorts of ways. Injection gives the best results, but it's rather a nuisance, and there's always danger of getting dirt in. You have to look out for blood poisoning all the time. It stimulates the imagination marvelously. And to this day, there's far more uh, infections, deaths, than there are overdose deaths. It kills all the pain and worry like a charm. But at that very moment, when you have the most gorgeous ideas, when you build golden palaces of what you are going to do, you have a feeling at the same time that nothing is really worth doing, and that itself gives you a feeling of terrific superiority to everything else in the world. And so, from the objective point of view, it comes to nothing. But heroin does all that morphia does. It is a derivative of morphia. Diacetylmorphine is the technical name. Only instead of bathing you in philosophical inertia, you are as keen as mustard on carrying out your ideas. I've never taken any myself. I suppose we might as well start now. Moonchild might be worth reading too. I had a vision of myself as a peacock strutting and preening. Lou, her mouth half open, was gazing at me, fascinated with enormous eyes, the pupils dilated by cocaine. It was just the male bird showing off to his mate. I wanted her to adore me for my little scraps of knowledge, the fragments I had picked up in my abandoned education. Now, even more than this book, that represents Crowley's drug use, there's even more education and experiments of various things. There's a missing book on the cactus. Crowley, you know, what's the name of that cactus drug? Lou is always practical, and she puts something of the priestess into everything she does. There was a certain solemnity in the ways in which she took up the heroin on the blade of a knife and put it to the back of her hand. Yeah, peyote. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. My knight, she said with flashing eyes, your lady arms you for the fight. And she held out her fist to my nostrils. I snuffed up the heroin with a sort of ritualistic reverence. I can't imagine where the instinct came from. Is it the sparkle of cocaine that excites one to take it greedily, and the dullness of the heroin which makes it seem a much more serious business? I felt as if I were going through some very important ceremony. When I had finished, Lou measured a dose for herself. She took it with a deep, grave interest. I was reminded of the manner of my old professor at UCH when he came to inspect a new case. A case mysterious but evidently critical. The excitement of the cocaine had somehow solidified. Our minds had stopped still, and yet their rest was as intense as their previous motion. Now, I'm not going to mention the name of the case, but I saw this video on Court TV of related to a very famous case, and the whole video is available somewhere. This guy, when the videos slow down in a particular part, you see this person take this opiate, and this, it takes like 15 minutes or 20 minutes or something for it to have taken like 20 something minutes, I think maybe it took for the thing to take effect. I don't remember exactly how many minutes, but yeah, some of these things. We found ourselves looking into each other's eyes with no less ardor than before, but somehow it was a different kind of ardor. It was as if we had been released from the necessity of existence in the ordinary sense of the word. We were both wondering who we were and what we were and what was going to happen. And at the same time, we had a positive certainty that nothing could possibly happen. It was a most extraordinary feeling. It was of a kind quite unimaginable by any ordinary mind. I will go a bit further than that. I don't believe the greatest artist in the world could invent what we felt. And if he could, he couldn't describe it. I'm trying to describe it myself, and I feel I'm not making out very well. Come to think of it, the English language has its limitations. When mathematicians and men of science want to exchange thoughts, English isn't much good. They've had to invent new words, new symbols. Look at Einstein's equations. I knew a man once that knew James Hinton, who invented the fourth dimension. Pretty bright chap he was, but Hinton thought on the most ordinary subjects at least 6 times as fast as he did. And when it came to Hinton's explaining himself, he simply couldn't do it. That's the great trouble. When a new thinker comes along, they all moan that they can't understand him. I think I'm going to have to kill a mouse. The fact annoys them very much, and 10 to 1 they persecute him and call him an atheist or a degenerate or a pro-German, or a Bolshevik, or whatever the favorite term of abuse happens to be at the time. Well, now people are called white supremacists with nothing that has to do with racism. If they support equal rights, they're called white supremacists. It's like, Wells told us a bit about this in that book of his about giants, and so does Bernard Shaw in his Back to Methuselah. It's nobody's fault in particular, but there is, and you can't get over it. And here was I, a perfectly ordinary man with just about the average allowance of brains, suddenly finding myself cut off from the world and classed by myself. I felt that I had something perfectly tremendous to tell, but I couldn't tell even myself what it was. And there was Lou standing right opposite, and I recognized instinctively by sympathy that she was just in the same place. We had no need of communicating with each other by means of articulate speech. We understood perfectly. We expressed the fact in every subtle harmony of glance and gesture. The world had stopped suddenly still. We were alone in the night and the silence of things. We belonged to eternity in some indefinable way, and that infinite silence blossoms inscrutably into embrace. The heroine had begun to take hold. We felt ourselves crowned with colossal calm. We were masters. We had budded from nothingness into existence. And now existence slowly compelled us to action. There was a necessity in our own natures which demanded expression, and after the first intense interpenetration of our individualities, we had reached the resultant of all the forces that composed us. In one sense, it was that our happiness was so huge that we could not bear it, and we slid imperceptibly into the conceding that the ineffable mysteries must be expressed by means of sacramental action. Maybe it's the creaky old window thing. Oh, and the smoke alarm needs batteries. But all this took place at an immense distance from reality. A concealed chain of interpretation linked the truth with the obvious commonplace fact that this was a good time to go across to Montmartre and make a night of it. We dressed to go out with, I imagine, the very sort of feeling as a newly made bishop would have the first time he puts on his vestments, but none of this would have been intelligible to or suspected by anybody who had seen us. We laughed and sang and interchanged joyous nothings while we dressed. And when I said queer earlier, I mean basically the same, strange. I don't mean, just like gay here, joyous, When we went downstairs, we felt like gods descending upon earth, immeasurably beyond mortality. With the cocaine, we had noticed that people smiled rather strangely. Our enthusiasm was observed. We even felt a little touch of annoyance at everybody not going to the same place. But this was perfectly different. The sense of our superiority to mankind was constantly present. We were dignified beyond all words to express. Our own voices sounded far, far off. We were perfectly convinced that the hotel porter realized that he was receiving the orders of Jupiter and Juno to get a taxi. We never doubted that the chauffeur knew himself to be the charioteer of the sun. I've encountered that with the different types of drug addicts through the years that they've, the non-user, they're superior to the non-user just because they're a user. Or perhaps they haven't fallen into some of the ill results, so they're like, This is perfectly wonderful stuff, I said to Lou as we passed the Arc de Triomphe. I don't know what you mean by saying the stuff didn't have any special effect upon you. Why, you're perfectly gorgeous. You bet I am, laughed Lou. The king's daughter is all glorious within. Her raiment is of wrought gold, and she thrust her face out to be kissed, like a comet pushing its way to the sun. Didn't you know I was the king's daughter? She smiled with such seductive sublimity that something in me nearly fainted with delight. Hold up, Cocky, she chirped. It's all right. You're it, and I'm it, and I'm your little wife. I could have torn the upholstery. I could have torn the upholstery out of the taxi. I felt myself a giant. Gargantua was a pygmy. I felt the need of smashing something into matchwood, and I was all messed up about it because it was Lou that I wanted to smash, and at the same time she was the most precious and delicate piece of porcelain that ever came out of the Ming Dynasty or whatever the beastly period is. And as I said, being prescribed opiates, I definitely know that there's sort of a almost satanic anger that comes with that, but you know, got to hold to your principle of how you express that. The most fragile, exquisite beauty. To touch her was to profane her. I had a sudden, nauseating sense of the bestiality of marriage. I had no idea at the time that this sudden revulsion of feeling was due to a mysterious premonition of the psychological effects of heroin in destroying love, definitely stimulating things like alcohol, hashish, and cocaine give free range to Cupid. Their destructive effect on him is simply due to the reaction. One is in debt, so to speak, because one has outrun the constable, but what I may call the psychological type of dope, of which morphine and heroin are the principal examples, are directly inimical to active emotion and emotional action, while the mental and physical effects, well, I mean, mental, physical, but, of some of the other opiates that they've developed are worse, like codeine and its derivatives are worse than morphine and its derivatives. The normal human feelings are transmuted into what seems on the surface. Their spiritual equivalents, ordinary good feeling becomes universal benevolence, a philanthropy which is infinitely tolerant because the moral code has become meaningless for it. A more than satanic pride swells in one's soul, as Baudelaire says, "Hast thou not sovereign contempt, which makes the soul so kind?" And we drove up the butte Montmartre towards the Sacre Coeur. We remained completely silent, lost in our calm beatitude. You must understand that we were already excited to the highest point. The effect of the heroine had been to steady us in that state. Instead of beating passionately up the sky with flaming wings, we were poised aloft in the illimitable ether. We took fresh doses of the dull, soft powder now and again. We did so without greed, hurry, or even desire. The sensation was of infinite power, which could afford infinite deliberation. Will itself seemed to have been abolished. We were going nowhere in particular simply because it was our nature to do so. Our beatitude became more absolute every moment. With cocaine, one is indeed master of everything, but everything matters intensely. With heroin, the feeling of mastery increases to such a point that nothing matters at all. There is not even the disinclination to do what one happens to be doing, which keeps the opium smoker inactive. The body is left to itself so perfectly that one is not worried about its natural activities. Again, despite our consciousness of infinity, we maintain concurrently a perfect sense of proportion and respect of ordinary matters. Now, one can have some of that feeling without drugs, and you kind of don't have the experience like hydromorphone. Was that the stuff I was on in the hospital? When I was a teenager, they give a little bit of more than you need and just utter bliss, but then you're out like that. And that's what people have when they overdose. They're like, if they have nothing else in their life, they're trying to get to the point where they almost die, and that's really not what you want to do. And this is the portion where I can, except for certain parts of story, I will be more open to questions or comments. You can always comment whether or not I'm going to respond. Saturday, May 2nd, 2009. I listened to Up the Bari, Surah 20 through 23. He's the reader and translator. I read the Living Talmud to page 225. L. Ron Hubbard, An Introduction to Scientology. Oh, did I read that whole thing, or is that the program? I watched the Hizbul Bahar of Abul Hassan Ashaduli. I discoursed with the next door neighbor about, I can't read that, some sort of spice scent offering, evoking. Enochian Key 7. $11 to $1:14. Oh, no, 4 to 4:14 p.m. 5:50 to 6:09 p.m. Abagani, Surah 5. I listened to Up the Bari, Surah 24 to 27, or the Living Talmud to page 248. Introduction to Scientology. Is that or is that a program? I think that I borrowed a program at some point. I wasn't going to join Scientology, but Awakening the Heart, a Sufi conference, October 16 to 19, 2008. Opening talk, Llewellyn Von Lee and Pir Zia Anayat Khan, Thursday, October 16, 2008. Copyright 2008, the Golden Sufi Center. I used to watch and listen to everything on their website. 6:41 to 6:54 p.m. The 8th Enochian Key, 7:40 to 7:52 p.m. Monday the 4th. Sleep CD on Abakani, 17. The 9th Enochian Key, 3:33 to 3:57 p.m. 6:30 to 6:42 p.m. 7:33 to 8:38. Amber scent offering representing peace of mind. I listened to Up the Bari, Surah 28 through 30. I watched the opening talk with Llewellyn Von Lee and Pir Zia Anayat Khan. L. Ron Hubbard, Introduction to Scientology. Okay, that was a program. I read The Inlet. Tuesday the 5th on Abagani 34. I watched the Introduction to Scientology and read The Inlet. Opening talk with Llewellyn Von Lee and Pir Anayat Khan from the Awakening the Heart program. I listened to Up the Bari, Surah 31 to 34. Enochian Key 19. Ather 22. 3:57 to 4:12 p.m. 4:21 to 4:55 or 8. I think it's at 8. 6:33 to 6:47. Wednesday the 6th Sleep CD on Abdulghani, Surah 68. I watched The Dervish Project. Oh, I haven't watched that one in a long time. L. Ron Hubbard, An Introduction to Scientology. The opening talk with Llewellyn Von Lee and Pir Anayat Khan from the Golden Sufi Center. I listened to Up the Bari, Surah 35 to 30 to 59. Spice scent offering, representing the zeal of life. I went to Mount Angel Abbey with the next door neighbor. I looked over images in the chapel. Oh, if I find those, maybe I'll do voiceovers there. Thursday the 7th, Sleepsy on Abdagani Surah 1. I watched L. Ron Hubbard, An Introduction to Scientology. Opening talk with Lon Von Lee and Pierre and I Khan, the 2008 program. I bought it when the Princess of Cups was off somewhere dealing with problems. I listened to Abdabari Surah 40 to 49. Amber, Peace of Mind, Scent Offering. The 12th Enochian Key, which is something, an operation I did with her when I met her. 7 to 8:21 p.m. Friday the 8th, I watched the opening talk with Llewellyn Von Lee and Pierre Zia and I at Con. Thursday the 10th. Oh, wait, no, Thursday's the 9th. Oh, wait. Okay, maybe it was the Thursday talks. What's that? Lilac Mist Offering, representing clairvoyance, divination, gentleness, and I have that. I have that in the vaporizer, so that's for these couple months the scent. I listened to Abdul-Bari, Surah 50 to 69, Enochian Key 19, Author 24, 6:08 to 6:30 p.m., 6:57 to 6:30 to 7:14, 7:51 to 8:07 p.m. I watched the opening talk with Llewellyn Von Lee and Pirzia Anayat Khan. I listened to Abdabari Surah 60 to 69, Amber, Purity of Mind, Scent Offering, the 19th Enochian Key with the 25th author. Maybe I should meditate with that after this program. 6:51 to 7:11 p.m., 7:57 to 8:30 p.m. So the 10th. I read the Quran with a phrase-by-phrase English translation by Ali Qari. I listened to Abdabari Surah 70 to 84, Spice Scent Offering, Clairvoyance, the 19th Enochian Key, the 29th Author. I can't help but think there's going to be something profoundly Gnostic, about that author. Like maybe something related to some stuff I'm having trouble finding, or maybe there's not a source, but there's going to be a source in the experience. I don't know. I'll know when I tell you about it. 4:12. Oh, what I can tell about it. To 4:37 p.m., 5:55 to 6:22 p.m. I discoursed with the next door neighbor about priestcraft. Obviously, the ha-kahanim, as the term goes, is not quite your ordinary, is the access controlling priest, the professional priest, and me and that neighbor definitely took issue with that sort of thing. I watched Beyond Our Differences, Pirzia and Ayad Khan interview, Monday the 11th. Beyond Our Differences, and interview, Pirzia and Ayad Khan, 2008. The Sufi Center, I listened to Abdabari, Surah 85 to 114. I read Al-Quran, translated by Ali Qari, to Surah 79, Ayat 10. And I might as well point out that one. That's the blue one right there. It's kind of like a Shia/Sunni comment where you have comments, which is the 19th Enochian author. The 30th Enochian author within the 19th Enochian key, of course. 213 to 234. Rarely share any experience. Just like, I saw some psychedelic clouds and I felt flowy, and it's physically and otherwise worth it to do these meditations. So, at least once you get the hang of it, maybe at first it doesn't seem that way in that respect, but devotion makes you that point. Tuesday the 12th, I watched Beyond Our Differences, Pirzia and Khan's interview from the October 16 to 19. I listened to Lon Milo Ducat's Red Ice Creations. Oh, well, there was some Lon Milo Ducat interview or something, or program that he did somewhere that I listened to. I read Al-Quran to Surah 85 for the Tahrik Tarso Quran, the same one that I pointed out. Wednesday the 13th, I watched interview of Pir Zia Inayat Khan from Awakening the Heart and Beyond Our Differences. And so through Surah 114, 8-6. Okay. So I finished with that translation. Amber Scent Offering, representing Pure. Thursday, 14th of May, 2009. Rose, representing Aphrodisiac. I watched Pirzia Inayat Khan's interview, October 16 through 19, Beyond Our Differences, the 19th Enochian key, author 3:30 to 5:29 p.m. I read a supplication for recitation on completing a reading of the Quran and key signs used in the Arabic text, page 867 to 876, and 941 to 944. Friday the 15th, I read Saudi Aramco World, September, October 2008. I watched interview of Pirzia Inayat Khan, Awakening the Heart, Beyond Our Differences, discoursed on interpretation, sapiential, santiam, wisdom and knowledge tradition with the next door neighbor. I watched, the Saturday the 16th, I watched Beyond Our Differences, the interview with Pirzia Inayat Khan, Awakening the Heart. I read Saudi Aramco World, May, June 2009. The thing's free, so it's worthwhile signing up for it. It's a worthwhile read. Watch Sleeps, and it's free. So, Sleepsy on Abdagani, Surah 57. I listened to the Yoga Sutra, Uptanjali, the Yoga Sutra, which I shared on the channel, page. Well, I didn't show the pictures, but Dover's reprint was what I had in my hand. Page I to XL and 1. Rose Scent Offering, representing beauty. I went to the Saturday night lecture. What's that say? Was it a stopper or something? Sunday the 17th, I watched Beyond Our Patanjali. I read the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, page 1 to 101. I translated and annotated by James for Woods. So we're going to have in the next program here, if we get to that point, we're going to have, there's going to be visions described, or dreams. Same thing, right? Okay. So, I'm going to close with some Avestan prayers. Well, the English translations thereof. I'm sharing that on the channel, but I've altered these translations, so I'm... At which end, O Hormuzd, thou art coming, with thy bountiful spirit, i.e. Spena Meno. We praise the immortal, radiant, and the swift-footed horses. The sun, we praise Meher Yazata of wide pastures, who is the speaker of true word, the sitter in the assembly of 1,000 ears, well-shaped, 10,000 eyes, the exalted, surveying from a watchtower, our large fortress, brave, sleepless, and ever wakeful. We praise him, the Lord of all countries, who is Meher Yazata, whom Ahura Mazda created, the most glorious of the spiritual Yazatas. May the exalted Meher Yazata and Ahura Mazda come here for our help. We praise the immortal, radiant, and swift-footed horse, the sun. And, okay, we're starting in verse, is that 5? Oh, the Korshed Nya Yesh, we're ending 5 here. And the language is sort of ambiguous in places, so I'm not meaning this as I'm worshiping the angels. Basically, we're speaking well of, we're calling to mind. And Meher Yazata is spoken of as 1,000 ears and 10,000 eyes. And Bhutat is in Sanskrit Tad, meaning here and so in a way. But we praise Tishtriya Yazata of sound eyes. We praise the star. We praise Tishtriya, those belonging to Tishtriya. We praise Tishtriya, the radiant and glorious. We praise the star Vanant, created by Mazda. We praise the star Tishtriya, the radiant and glorious. We praise the sky that follows its own law. Now, some people would say this stuff in worship of these things, but that's not what I mean, or my intention with that. We praise the boundless eternal time, the time appointed for the long period, the wind, our Govind Yazata, bountiful and of good creation. We praise wisdom, the most upright, righteous, created by Mazda, i.e. religious education, the good Mazdayastian religion, the chosen path amongst other paths, the terrible weapon, and Mount Seokant, created by Mazda. We praise every righteous spiritual Yazata and every righteous Yazata pertaining to this world. We praise our own Farvashi. Come to my help, O Creator Hormazd. We praise the good strong, the beneficent Vashis, the righteous people. We praise the immortal, radiant, and swift-footed horse, the sun. And some of these don't sound like it could be true, physically, but, you have your spiritual realities behind things and psychological realities that aren't quite the same. So there's the giver, Tishtriya is the giver of sound eyes, and it's thought to be Sirius, or the dog star, as we call it. And those relating to Sirius, BX, I don't. Tristriano. Okay, that's how you say that. And also in Persian mythology, you have, just like the Dogon, you can't see Sirius B and C, but you kind of have the idea that it's there. And Venant is the central star in the west. Fomalhaut is generally thought to be the same, and it's called the opponent of Jupiter. The Vestan word Sura is like Shula in Sanskrit, which means weapon. Zaranumantem is wrathful and terrible, horrible. Zaranu relates to the German Zorn, wrath, anger. And Fravashi can be original specimen, original form, original root. It's similar to soul, but it's not quite the same. For the propitiation of the Creator Ahura Mazda during such and such Ga, for the worship of the immortal, radiant, and swift-footed horse, the sun, for its veneration, propitiation, and glorification, the officiating priest, Zoatar, may proclaim unto me excellences of the verse, Yatha Ahu Va'erio. Let the Raspi, who is righteous, and the learned pronounce the excellence of this verse, Atta Ratush Ashat Chit Hacha. We praise the immortal, radiant, and swift-footed horse, the sun. When the light of the sun is warmer, when it shines, there stand hundreds and thousands spiritual yazatas. These yazatas gather together that glory and send it down, and distribute or spread that glory upon the earth created by Mazda, the immortal, radiant, and swift-footed horse. Sun increases. What does it increase or make prosperous? It increases the word of righteousness, the creation of righteousness. And Ram Kavastar is equivalent to ether, and Vayu Uparo Kairio is the wind, air, and between the sky and earth. And that being associated with Meher Yazata. And Havari Raokshne is like when the sun warms with its light. And there's a sense of of germs in an Avestan term, which we see for creation. Okay. Numan of Menuram is also a relation. When the sun rises, it becomes the means of purifying the earth created by Ahura Mazda. It becomes the means of purifying flowing waters, spring waters, waters of the seas, stagnant waters, and it becomes the means of purifying the righteous creation, which is of the Holy Spirit. Not in the Christian sense, by the way. For if the sun were not to rise, the demons here would kill or destroy all, and that are in the 7 regions, that any spiritual yazatas, even here, would not find support in this material world. And Kavan Irata is said to be the largest and most splendid of all other regions. Kvandaratha is the center. Vauru Jareshte to the northeast. Vauru Bareshte to the northwest. Vinad Afshu to the southeast. Fradadafshu to the southwest. Savahe to the east. Arvizahi to the west. Whoever worships or praises the sun, that is immortal, radiant, swift-footed horse, in order to withstand darkness, the demons, the brood of darkness, the thieves and robbers and wizards and witches, and the deadly destruction, he, as it were, worships Ahura Mazda. He worships the holy immortals. He worships his own soul. He who worships the sun propitiates all heavenly and earthly yazatas. I praise Meher Yazata, the Lord of wide pastures, of 1,000 ears and 10,000 eyes. I praise the mace of Mithra, the Lord of wide pastures, sufficiently made ponderous, weighty for smiting against the skull of the demons. I praise the best friendship of friendships, which is between the moon and the sun. On account of his radiance and glory, I worship that immortal radiance and swift-footed horse, sun. With audible or most famous yasna, we worship the immortal, radiant, and swift-footed horse, sun, with libations, who are performers of the Heoma ceremony, are acknowledgers of the Heoma ceremony. We worship the sun with milk, Bereshman, skill of tongue, with the holy spell, and with good word, good deed, obligations, and rightfully spoken words. Now, by that, we can also say that we're making mention with, just like some rituals require the moon to be in sight of what you're doing, or particularly the substance. That's what's going on here. And the name of the demon that we mentioned here, the foul air demon. Remember that game of chess stuff, the game of Asha. Za'athrabio means with libations. And there's a whole procedure. Well, we'll go into that elsewhere, or we have gone into that elsewhere, so we don't need to. Among the living beings, whoever is better in acts of worship of which Ahura Mazda himself is aware, on account of his holiness, all such men and women we revere. To pray in a murmur. O Lord of the entire world, Hormaz, the creator and increaser of man and mankind, out of the creation of all other species, O bountiful Lord of all the faithful and good religion, may I, the faithful, amongst the Mazda worshippers, gain the knowledge. See, Mazda's the one being worshipped. So, of the religion, and I become steadfast on the religion, and may goodness reach me. May it be so. I may the blessings which I ask be fulfilled. I praise the worship, glorification, skill, or efficaciousness, and strength of the immortal, radiant, and swift-footed horse, Sun. Whoever worships thee, the immortal, radiant, and swift-footed horse, the Sun of Ahura Mazda, and pertaining to Ahura Mazda, with best oblations, with excellent oblations, and with oblations filtered by the pious people, do thou, O Khorshid Yazata, grant radiance and glory unto that man. Do grant him soundness of the body, health, happiness, victory of the body, wealth full of happiness, progeny naturally bright. Do thou grant him long life, and do thou grant him the bright and happy heaven of the righteous. May it be so, as I pray, i.e. may all the blessings be fulfilled. Homage unto the creator of the entire universe, on the day of good and holy auspicious name, in the month of the auspicious name of the period, or of the day. May the luster and glory of the immortal, radiant, and swift-footed horse, Sun, increase. May that courageous and victorious Khorshid Yazata come to my help for courage and victory. May there be justice of the good Mazda, your worshipping religion, its knowledge, promulgation, and fame in the 7 regions of the earth.